is Keys to the Shop, episode 261, The Basics of Managing Managers. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DiFiorio. I'm your host for the show. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. I hope you're having an awesome week. And I want to remind you that if you haven't subscribed to Keys to the Shop, please go ahead and do so by hitting the subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts. Also, it's super helpful if you share these episodes with a friend or someone you think can really be helped by the content of these interviews and these episodes. And also, if you've been helped by this show, I would love it if you'd give this show a 5-star review on iTunes. A review or a rating, whatever, is just really helpful to get the show out there to more people. Did you know that Keys to the Shop offers consulting and coaching for you in your business? If you're just getting into the coffee game and want to start on the right foot, or you're an existing operator and just want to take things to the next level, or you have some problems and projects that you need assistance on, there are a lot of different ways that Keys to the Shop can help you either in person or remotely over the phone. And I would love to talk with you about what's going on in your business and how Keys to the Shop might be able to help you. We can set up a 15-minute call and talk about how Keys to the Shop Consulting can help you thrive. Again, that email for Keys to the Shop Consulting, chris@keystotheshop.com. Now, today's episode is brought to you by the wonderful folks over at Prima Coffee. Prima Coffee is an amazing specialty coffee equipment supplier, and I love working with them because not only do they curate the best equipment from around the globe, but they also work with you to make sure that you're getting the right equipment for your situation. And it's so important because this is the nerve center of your business. The equipment is a big expense, and you want to know that you have good people in your corner fighting to help you be successful. So right now, for Keys to the Shop listeners, you can get 5% off your entire order when you go to prima-coffee.com/keys and use the code KEYS5 at checkout. That's keys and then the number 5 at checkout to get 5% off your entire order. A really good deal from really great people. So I'd encourage you again, if you're in the market for commercial coffee equipment, you have to check out prima-coffee.com/keys. Today's episode is also brought to you by the Pacific Barista Series, which is my favorite plant-based performance beverage. And I think when you try it, it will be yours because this is created for baristas and basically by baristas, because before any of their extensive lineup of plant-based beverages reaches your coffee bar, it has already been tested by some of the world's best baristas to make sure that it stands up to the heat from steaming, produces awesome texture, and also keeps the balance of the beverage focused on coffee. It's absolutely necessary that you have great plant-based options for your customers, and I don't think you could get any better than the Pacific Barista Series. So to find out more information and get this in your store, go to pacificfoodservice.com. And again, if you're looking for the absolute best in plant-based beverages for your coffee bar, then I don't think you need to look further than the Pacific Barista Series. Okay, everyone. Well, today I wanted to talk to you about a subject that's near and dear to my heart, management. Now, I've said it several times on this show before, but I'll say it again. I think management is probably the most crucial role in the cafe when it comes to leadership, at least. I don't want to get into splitting hairs over who's more important, who do you love more, mom or dad? None of that stuff. But management is so important. So important, in fact, that businesses can be ruined or made by the quality of the management. And as we're going to talk about today, management just doesn't happen in a vacuum. So you can't just say we have to find good managers. We have to create good managers. We have to have a good philosophy and mindset around management ourselves before we can even hope to do that. And so to help us get management done right, I wanted to talk to you about something that doesn't get too much attention and really should, and that's how to manage your managers. So let's get right into it. On the face of it, managing your managers sounds kind of like something that you didn't want to do when you put management in place. For a lot of owners, they have been doing all the work, all of the drinks, the ordering, the going to the grocery store, doing all of the taxes, all of the little menial and large stuff all at the same time. And when you get a manager, oftentimes what that signals to you is that there's some relief, is the manager is going to take from you the responsibilities that you don't want so that you can go do other things, or at least have some free time. And so when you identify somebody who you want to put in a place of management, There's this thing that happens where I think of these old cartoons. I can't remember if it was like Hanna-Barbera or Looney Tunes or something like that. But it's really weird. The way the cartoon went was basically there are two people that are shipwrecked on an island and there's nothing to eat. And so eventually one of them starts to get so hungry that when he looks at the other, all he sees is a giant turkey leg. And then he starts chasing him around the island trying to eat him, which is really, really weird. And part of the reason why so many of us are kind of messed up today, maybe. But the point is, oftentimes owners will look at a manager like that. They'll say, oh, they're going to take on all of this stuff. Oh, I can't wait until I have all this time off, or I don't have to do this. I don't have to do that. They're going to take all of this responsibility away from me. And I believe that that is the wrong way to look at it. Actually, I think we should be thinking of this as just a transitioning to a different set of responsibilities. Now, I'm not saying that there are no benefits to putting in a manager and that you shouldn't be excited about getting a manager. I think you should. In fact, if you're the place where you're putting in a manager, you're probably at a good place in your business. And so I'm only half joking about looking at them like a turkey leg, because in some ways they are. The point is, there are positives here, but you have to realize you're not freeing yourself up from responsibility. You're transferring responsibility to somebody else and taking on a new set of responsibilities yourself. It's not a way to escape, but it's a way to redistribute your time and authority in more effective ways. And anybody who's been managing managers for any number of years will tell you that this is true, whether they wanted it to be or not. My hope in talking to you about this is that you'll enter into it knowing fully that you're still going to have a set of management responsibilities around this individual, your manager, so that when you do end up having to manage them, which you will, you don't feel resentment towards that, or you don't project it as their problem, and maybe you pick the wrong manager. This is something that happens a lot, and it's unfortunate and can be solved if you just approach it from the mindset that you are going to still have to be an active, participating, present leader and manager in this person's life. It's not going to look the same as you doing everything, but you're still going to be doing something. So now we're going to move on from that to talk about the next thing, and that is specifically training managers. Hopefully you've selected a good person. Hopefully you've selected somebody that embodies the values of your company and has a proven track record of the kind of leadership that you respect, and maybe they do it a little bit different than you, but that's fine as long as they not only get the job done, but others respect them and they, again, embody the values that are the most important for you and your team. So this person now is a manager. What happens after that is really up to you. I mean, we talked about this a little bit in our shift break called Leadership Abandonment Syndrome, where most managers are made managers and then just get completely forgotten about. That's, again, a symptom of somebody who thinks that, putting a manager in place is a way to just escape from leadership and management altogether. Training and coaching is actually what you do instead of abdicating your responsibility as a leader. So it starts the same way as you would start with any job. You have to provide role clarity, you have to give them specific expectations, and then train them on the technical aspects of the job the way you want them to do it. So all three of those things, giving them specific expectations, giving them role clarity, and then training them on the technical aspects, that's going to take time. So you have to leave room for them to develop. This is just the way you would train a barista. So you can think about it that way. It's not that you're just going to give them a bunch of information about how to do things like bank drops and inventory and P&L sheets, and then they're just going to be fine. You need, again, to play an active role in this and not only train them by relaying the information, but you need to coach them along the way and help them develop their skills as they do the things. This might take many months to get them to a place where they are doing the job very, very well and in a way that provides enough confidence in you to not be hands-off, but to know that they're going to make decisions that you will approve of and even do things that you might not have thought of but are genius. They're amazing. And we all want that confidence when we're talking about delegating authority to someone else. We don't want to be laying awake at night wondering if they're doing their job well. That wondering is an indictment against us as trainers and coaches. If you're wondering about your baristas and how they're making their mochas, and I worry about the customer service of, this person or that person, that's an indictment against you and not so much them, because there needs to be more training. There needs to be clearer expectations. There needs to be more coaching. And so it is also the case with managers. Again, we need to train them. We need to give them clarity of their roles and specific expectations that we have of them. All of that, of course, needs to be in writing, because they need to know what it means to do the job well. Oftentimes, management will be given a whole bunch of authority, but no direction. And it's hard for them to know exactly what they're supposed to be doing with their time until you find something that you're not happy with but didn't articulate, and then hold them accountable for it in a pretty unfair fashion. The other part here about training and coaching your manager and being dedicated to seeing them develop over a longer period of time than maybe you thought you would need to is that you need to leave room for them to do things differently than you would do them. You can't clone yourself. This is not the point of having a manager. Everybody needs to do the bank drop the same way. Fine. Everybody needs to, order inventory the same way. We all agree with that. But as much as I think undermanagement is more of a problem in today's workplace than overmanagement, overmanagement actually does exist. Overbearing people is more what I would call it. People who are really and truly weirdly trying to clone themselves, down to the words that people use during staff meetings, and really just kind of subverting that person's ability to be themselves as a leader. You need to let go a little bit. Part of delegation is letting go. It's not the opposite of hands-on. So hands-on leadership is something we want. We want to be involved. We want to be clear and strong in our leadership. We want them to do the same. So when we model great leadership and management to them, they'll model it back to the staff, okay? But there is a point at which you would need to allow them to grow into that position in their individuality, just like you would a barista. Some of the worst service experiences come from a whole staff that are just browbeaten into uniformity. They all wear uniforms. They all have scripts that they say. Nobody makes a weird joke. Nobody, it's boring, really boring. And you can't expect your manager to just be a carbon copy of you or some facsimile of an idea that you got from a management book. We need to mix hands-on leadership with authenticity and authentic personal expression of very specific values through the operations. Now, this really transitions into my next point, which is something that happens when you get a little bit nervous about managers and how you don't really have that much control anymore the way you used to. As an owner, it's easy for you to just walk into a store. If you have a couple stores and everyone knows you're the boss because in the About Us section on the website, it's your whole story about, starting at a stand in the farmer's market, etc. Everyone knows who you are and they are intimidated by you, whether they put that out there or not. What happens when you walk into a cafe and you see that something is being done that's not the way you would do it? The first instinct is to assert your authority and say, I am the owner, and I disapprove of this thing that you're doing. And they're like, oh, geez, I'm sorry, I'll not do that. And somebody else said that it was okay to do this, or it's just a big confusing thing. And then the manager hears about it, and then the manager feels weird because you went around their authority. And a lot of times it has to do with something really petty. It's more about you knowing that there's something off and it's your baby and you don't want it to be off. And so your hand is reaching out to control it. And what I'll tell you right now is that you need to stop that. You need to stop interfering. If you've given a manager responsibility over a cafe, then your role is to support that manager's authority and go through them in order to assert any changes. There are going to be extreme examples where you can assert your authority. If there's somebody that's acting out in the shop inappropriately and you have to assert yourself there. But think about this. If you don't like the volume of the music being played in the cafe when you walked in, it's probably been playing like that for days and days, weeks. and you've not known about it because you got a manager, have been doing other things, scouting a third location or whatever. And by asserting yourself in that situation, what's going to happen is you're going to diminish the authority of the manager. You're going to cause a lot of questions to come up, which is the manager was actually okay with this. Why is the owner now not okay with this? It just becomes a really confusing thing. So instead, what you need to do is control yourself instead of the situation. Control yourself by writing it down on a piece of paper or something, and next time you're talking with your manager, ask them about it. And if you need to, just say, well, we need to change that because it really is something that's, I find is really abrasive. Maybe we can turn it down a little bit. It's a silly example, but I have seen so many weird passive-aggressive scenarios take place when owners go around the manager and try to be a manager to baristas. Your present authority in the coffee shop is that manager. So your role is to lift them up, is to support them, and also to do so in public, to do so in front of others and defer to their judgment. Again, this is part of the whole letting go thing. Not everything is a crisis. Not everything requires your input. So the message is reinforce their authority. Don't subvert it. Control yourself and go through them. And by doing that, you're actually making your business strong, and you're creating a respect for the position of manager that is going to serve the business well into the future. But you're not doing anybody any favors, especially yourself, when you keep on interfering and don't allow that position to become established and that person to become established in that position. Now, the next thing we want to talk about is accountability and feedback. Accountability is part of how a manager knows that they're doing a good job or not. I would prefer if an owner met with a manager on a weekly basis. This is called a one-on-one. We're really big proponents of that here, and I think it's good for managers to do one-on-ones with their staff, and so critical and crucial that owners do one-on-ones with their managers, and that has to happen on a regular basis. Personally, I think an owner should meet with a manager once a week, mostly I think at the beginning of the week. If after a while you don't have the time to do that and your business is growing, maybe it's time for you to get a GM, a general manager, that will take the place of that regular check-in and conversation with your management. But management needs a weekly, regular accountability session and feedback session where they are asking you questions, you're asking them questions, everyone's finding clarity in getting direction for the week. That is crucial. And as I've said before, systems are care. And without systems for communication with your managers, it's going to be easy to abandon them, to allow them to try to figure things out on their own and interpret your lack of communication as a signal that you want them to figure it out themselves and that you're not available. And trust me, I've done this before myself as a general manager. It's really easy, no matter your intentions, for people to misinterpret lack of communication as a sign that you don't want them to ask you questions and things like that. So accountability is huge, and it's part of managing your managers. And it really should be something that you allow them to do for you also. As an owner, you need to get feedback for how you're doing from the managers. After all, in this position now, you really only interact with the managers. You can give them feedback about things you saw in the shop, but it is harder for them to give you feedback because of this power differential. This goes all the way up and down from baristas, manager, owner, or anywhere in between. It's always harder to give feedback up the authority chain than down. And so with respect to that, you need to make sure that you provide ample opportunity for the manager to give you feedback and that you're vulnerable, self-aware, and honest enough to be able to own it when they share that stuff with you and take responsibility. So accountability and feedback, communication, all of that has to be a real process, a real cultural institution in the relationship between an owner and a manager. If it is not the cornerstone of that relationship, then it's going to fall apart. People are going to miss each other, misinterpret intentions, motives. There's going to be bitterness. And then we introduce a lot of toxicity into the business. It can be a real mess. So when you're managing a manager, you need to provide those things for them. And I think we need to tie back into this something we talked about not too long ago, which is going above and beyond. Most managers are going to try to do this. They're going to try to do more than is expected of them. They're going to be trying to impress you. They're going to be trying to make sure that you don't see them faltering. It's going to be an uphill battle, but you need to be able to convince them that you don't expect them to know it all. You don't expect them to go above and beyond just to make you pleased in their performance, but that you want them to be healthy, balanced, thriving in their position, and that you are there to facilitate their success as a manager. And in all of these things, I'm going to say, I don't want you to walk away from this episode assuming that you do all these things, because immediately you may have a checklist in your head going like, I do that, that's fine, it's not me, my managers don't think that. I'm going to say that they might and probably do think this way about their role, and it's never good to be in neutral regarding these things. Actively fighting for the establishment of these principles within this relationship and structure of your business is a forever thing. It's not a, that's not me, I don't need to think about it thing. It's an always think about it thing. All right, so the last thing I'm going to say about managing managers is realize that this role, again, is so crucial, but this is not a role that you institute to try to get a lot of work done for a little money. Let me repeat that. We're not trying to get a lot of work done for a little money. When you put somebody in a management position, you have to compensate them fairly for that position. They're taking on the burden of leadership and authority, and it is a burden. And it is a stressor. In their position, they represent the values and standards of your company, and they are managing two different directions. They are serving the staff, and they are serving you. And on top of all of that, you're expecting them to guide this shop into profitability. That is a huge task, and it's something that you need to approach with the mindset of what can you pay them, not what can you get away with paying them. Generosity towards your managers. I often default towards recommending salaries that are well above and beyond what they made as a barista, factoring in the tips that they would have made for the days that they have to now take as admin days. So typically a manager will work a few shifts a week and then have a couple of admin days where they're doing schedules and inventory and one-on-ones and things like that. During those days, as a barista, they would have been making wages and tips. You need to make sure that you are not only matching that, but going above and beyond that. When there's added responsibility, there has to be more compensation. This is down to when I was talking about onboarding, and you have baristas who are unofficial trainers, and they're expected to train this new hire for the exact amount of money that they would have made had they just worked a shift. That's not really fair. You need to have at least a clock-in code that helps them make more per hour for added responsibility. So enough of this mentality that says, I want them to do more for the same amount and they get experience as their compensation. That's BS. I'm going to say that just clear as day. If you think experience is compensation and you don't need to compensate people financially, you're living in a dream world. And the high turnover you might have in your shop is probably a result of that stingy mindset. So I can't tell you exactly what to pay your managers and what you can pay, but I'll add to this that a manager, on top of being communicated with consistently throughout the year, needs to have an annual raise. If all is going well in the shop and they're doing a good job and the team is strong and all of the metrics that you have for their success are being met, then they deserve a raise. Sometimes that's anywhere from 2 to 3% of their annual salary given for their new salary. That's reasonable, okay? I'm not sure, again, what your position is. If you can afford to be more generous with that, then by all means. But I would encourage you, when you're putting managers in place and considering compensation, that you make sure that there's somewhere to go from where you start them. That doesn't mean that it goes on indefinitely. Every business has a cap in terms of how much they can actually afford to pay their staff versus, the profitability and size of the business and how much business they get, stuff like that. But again, mindset of generosity. What can you pay, not what can you get away with? So after talking about all of these things, knowing that the manager's role is so critical to the success of your business, we should be amply motivated to establish these things as cornerstones and real processes in our business regarding how we lead and manage managers, all the way from our mindset to our communication to our compensation. The way that we lead and manage managers determines how our businesses grow, and in the end, how much we and everyone else gets to enjoy our business. So I hope that this episode was helpful for you. If you have any questions about this or any other episodes and Keys to the Shop, please drop an email to me. Chris@keystotheshop.com is the email address to use, and that's the email address also to use if you're interested in working with me at Keys to the Shop Consulting your business. Again, that email, Chris@keystotheshop.com. And with that is the end of our show. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me again this week. I appreciate all of you. And as always, I hope that this episode has given you keys to the shop.